a distinct difference in these personalities of these men solely based off of if they are fully surrendered to Christ or not, and therefore if they are fully surrendered about all these other parts in their life. Um, Truly a different caliber of a man. And I would say the manliest men are the ones who talk about the problems
Correct. Yeah.
because hiding in your problems is actually hiding from love.
Yeah.
It seems like it's safe, for you to, put on the mirage, put on the image that you got your whole life together, but actually the safest place you can live in your life is to fully share the hardest parts about your life and still be loved anyway.
Yeah.
That's how you know you're safe. That's how you got armor to take on life's problems.
Welcome to the Valiant Forge podcast, where we help men overcome life's battles, show up better in the world, and become a valiant warrior for God. This is a place where we share practical strategies that will equip you on life's journey to help you become the man God has called you to be. Are you ready to overcome your doubt and fulfill your purpose just like Gideon? If so, let's go.
Welcome to the Valiant Forge podcast, where valiant warriors come to be sharpened. My guest today is Dr. Jake Thurston. He is an author and a pastor. He's a pastor of Resilient Church. It's in some college town. I don't remember where, but so he pastors a lot of young people. It's in a college town, and his church is growing. He wrote a book called You Need Friends. He's done a lot of extensive research on friendships, scientific studies, theological studies, the whole works. And I have not read the book yet, I have to be honest. But I did read some excerpts from it before I talked to him. And this interview happened a few months ago. I don't remember exactly how many months ago, but I'm so far behind in interviews now. Just a little side note to that. I know I haven't done a solo episode in a while. I'm going to start doing some soon. I'm probably going to start doing 2 podcasts a week where I'm going to be sharing a solo episode for 15 to 20 minutes and then an interview per week. And if you have noticed, within the last couple of months, I've put out an episode every Wednesday. That's going to be how it's going to be going forward, regardless if I'm up till the middle of the night getting one out. That's what's going to happen. I'm committed to this now. I have plenty of podcasts to post. It's just a matter of getting them edited, and all the other stuff that goes along with that. Regardless, enough blabbering. You will see a podcast, at least one podcast per week, and then in time you'll start seeing 2. This conversation that I had with Jake was, like I said, it was a couple months ago, but it was such a fun conversation. As I was going back and listening to it again during the editing process, I'm smiling the whole time. And even in the interview, if you look at the video, I'm smiling the whole time. It was such a fun conversation and so meaningful, and there's so much information that could help you become a better friend and learn how to be a friend or how to even make friends. We even go through a little back and forth on how to make a friend. So it's cool. And if you could do me a favor, if you like this episode as much as I do, please share it with a friend, because I have a feeling this is going to encourage a lot of people to make better friends. And what a better world we would have if we all became better friends. And another thing that he talks about, which is even more important than just friends, spiritual friends. There's a whole conversation about spiritual friends in here and how important it is to have spiritual friends. And what I'm trying to do here, we're at the very, very beginning stages of this, but I'm trying to build a community of like-minded men who want to help each other. So if you're interested in that, email me at thevaliantforgepodcast.com. I do have a website out now. It's kind of still in the works, but that's coming. Things are coming. Things are slowly happening, and as always, I am following the leading of the Holy Spirit. I'm not taking any quick steps unless I feel like this is a God thing. It took me a while to even get a website up. So, again, as always, if you like the episode, please like it by clicking the little like button below. Even if you dislike it, because it's engagement, I don't really want to see dislikes, but it doesn't matter. I need engagement. If you like the episode, tell me what you think. Do you struggle making friends? Let me know in the comments below. Do you struggle making friends? Do you have a lot of friends? Do you struggle being open with your friends? Because we talk about that. That's what the hook is right there. If you're open with your friends, a real man is someone who will open up to his brother and share something that they're struggling with. That's what a real man is. So, before I ramble on anymore, as I seem to do nowadays, here is my conversation with Jake Thurston. So, Jake, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Mark. It's a beautiful evening out here in South Dakota.
Yeah, I can see the sunlight coming through your window.
I know, yeah, it's right over there. So it's we finally have been getting some good spring weather. Spring is weird because some like especially this whole winter, we've had some days where we got up in like the upper 70s, lower 80s, and then 3 days later we're sub freezing. So it's just been back and forth, back and forth. We're finally in a good spell of some springtime here.
Yeah, we're kind of like that in the Midwest right now. We've had
Uh-huh.
days where it's you lived in the Midwest for a bit, right? You're from
Mhm.
Indiana, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know you could like go out in the morning with a coat on and then want to be wearing shorts by afternoon.
Exactly. It's the
Yeah.
worst.
I mean, right now in May, April, late April, early May, this is the time where the weather's just crazy.
Yeah.
Some friends and I are doing a bike ride at the end of May, a 50-mile bike ride, and we're trying to get some training in. The
Uh-huh.
weather has not been kind to us in that area. Like it's just been windy or cold or raining. So we're gonna need God's grace when we do this ride.
For sure. Oh man, yeah, it's maybe some supernatural strength to
Yeah.
power you through.
So you wrote a book called You Need Friends. So tell me, why do I need friends?
Oh man, why do you need friends? Because you are truly at your best in every way when you can be surrounded by people who know you intimately and there's nothing that you can hide. Um, just the study, like the studies all around from psychologically, sociologically, biologically, spiritually, theologically, all point back to our God-given design for community. Like even just us as a human species, we are a social gregarious species that is like we are made for interdependence over independence, which is just so contrary to the culture that we live in. But I'll keep it there, the 30,000 foot view, and we can get into all the nitty-gritty details
Yeah,
from all perspectives. But it's whether people think they need friends or not, uh, our lives are so much better when we can actually say that we have good, significant community and
yeah.
embedded into our lives.
I think
Mhm.
our society, a lot of aspects, kind of promotes you can do this on your own. You got your David Goggins of the world. He's like, I got this. I don't need anybody. He does it all on his own. There's
Mhm.
people like this, the Andrew Tates. I mean, Andrew Tate does have a brother and some men around him, but I don't know. It's just the promotion of you're the man, step up, be the man. You got this. You can do it on your own.
Mhm.
I've tried that. It doesn't work.
Mhm.
So here's a question for you, because I've had friendships and I've been hurt, and those friendships turned me down, and then I had a hard time finding friends again because I was worried about the hurt that happened. So how does a man deal with that?
Oh, such a good question, Mark. You deal with it by
Or
uh,
overcome it is the actual word.
yeah, dealing with it, overcoming it. Um, you pick yourself back up and you try again, right?
Why should I risk that hurt?
You should risk that hurt because at the end of the day, the irony of friendships is that they can both be the people who love you the most and can stab you in the back in the next instant.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the case with every single person. Like there will always be the risk. There will always be the possibility that someone is going to treat you poorly, that you're going to open yourself up to them and they're going to disrespect it, or they're going to blackmail you, or devastate your life with something that you entrusted with them. Like, of course, there's always that possibility.
Right.
But our brains are hardwired to protect us. Our survival instincts kick in. It's what anxiety is for. It's what cortisol is, when it pumps through our body, is for us to protect us from danger. And so when you have one, two, three, and more of these experiences with, toxic people or someone who betrayed you, your brain's going to then assume and develop the lie that everybody's like this.
Correct. Yeah.
Everybody's like this. And then at that point, it is better just for you to isolate from the risk of befriending anybody. But then, therefore, you will start getting into this cycle of loneliness. Like my book is extensive on, trying to remedy loneliness in those variety of ways. And one of the
Yeah.
things loneliness does is you get this cycle that makes you more cynical of people and distrusting. And if you're cynical and distrusting of people, then you're probably not going to be very nice to them. And
Correct.
therefore,
Yeah.
like, and what loneliness does is it gets you into kind of this hyper awareness mode of potential social threats. And therefore, you just assume everyone's out to get you. And like, and then you just double down on that sense of loneliness of like, oh, no one wants to befriend me, when you're actually becoming a person that no one wants to befriend.
Right.
It's this crazy back and forth that occurs. And I think that's why we just get so scarred um and reluctant to want to go deep. And then we don't realize that actually, it'd be similar saying, what's your favorite restaurant, Mark? Your favorite fast food restaurant?
My favorite fast food
Or food
restaurant,
chain. Yeah, fast food or food chain.
I don't want to sound like a cliche Christian, but it's Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. Oh, so good. You know, it
I honestly think the Chick-fil-A sauce is like part of the manna from heaven. The
when you read the Hebrew, it translates Chick-fil-A
Chick-fil-A
sauce,
sauce, yes,
right?
correct.
So like you go to one Chick-fil-A, maybe in a new town, and you just had an awful experience. It didn't say my pleasure when you said thank you. The chicken is just sad, like the fries are soggy, and the customer service is just not up to par of what you were expecting.
Right.
Do you then just go on and say, wow, I hate Chick-fil-A, now I'm never going again because of that one bad experience?
No.
Um, no, like it's the same thing with our friends. It's the same thing with people. Just because we had one or these couple of varieties, like we can't just cast this blanket statement on everyone else just to try to defend us when really we were hurt. There's so many other possibilities and great people out there uh, that can actually love you for who you are without any fear of you having to be hurt by them.
Yeah, I've actually experienced this, like what you were talking about, where, I was hurt by friends and I went into a shell for a little bit and I noticed the change in my mood. I noticed how I was reacting to things that my wife would say. Like my wife, my best friend, I was even treating her in a way that I normally wouldn't have, where I had to go into prayer and be like, God, what's wrong? Why am I acting like this? A lot of it was because I was regressing. I wasn't exercising. I was eating poorly. I was getting lazy and just staying on the couch playing games on my phone and binging on Netflix. I was doing all the things that I normally wouldn't do because I
Mhm.
let that hurt like put me into a shell. And within the last 5 years, I started building relationships again. I started with a mentor. I started talking to him. He became a friend and a mentor. And then I started just reaching out to more friends. And now I have multiple friends just since I started this podcast that, like I told you, I'm going on a bike ride with a bunch of friends
Yeah.
at the end of May. And
Uh-huh.
I've noticed the huge difference. And I know you know because you've researched it, but I don't know the science behind it all. I have heard that, relationships will, I don't remember the exact stat. I heard it a while back, but if you have healthy relationships, that is more healthy than, I can't, it was something about smoking cigarettes.
Yes. So the impact of, yeah, here's a stat. The impact of chronic loneliness has on our minds and our bodies from the
That's it,
extensive
yeah.
stress that comes from it has the equivalent health risk to our bodies and life expectancy as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Yeah.
Whereas on the flip side, being embedded in good, consistent community can extend our life expectancy as much as quitting a pack of cigarette smoking habit a day.
Wow. Yeah.
Crazy, right?
Right. Yeah, that blew me away when I heard that. I was like, wow. Yeah. I like I mentioned to you before we started recording, I'm an introverted person. I call myself introverted, but I know God can bring me out of that, and I believe that He is, and I'm just going to continue believing in faith that He is going to do that because I realize how important friendships are. So I know you talk about there's different types of friendships, correct?
Mhm.
There's spiritual friends, and then there's acquaintances. And can you go into detail on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we all know like there's a variety of friendships. Like we always kind of like subconsciously know that we can't be friends with everybody. There's always a select few. There's a number of different models out there that you can utilize, and I talk about two in my book. One is called Dunbar's number. Robin Dunbar was kind of the guy who really pegged that the maximum number of friends that humans have at any point is 150. Like it's just kind of this
Wow.
magic number of 150 friends. But there's a number of circles within that. I'm going to try to remember it because the way how he describes the circles are a little confusing. But we have just like 100 normal friends, casual friends. Like they're the people that, maybe you'd like invite to your wedding, but like you're connecting over social media and that's about it. But then within that is a ring of 50 of good friends. So these are the people you can call up, you're inviting maybe to your graduation. These are more of the people that you are inviting to some more of the important things of your life. But then within that is a group of 35. So 35 within the 50 are more personal friends. These are the ones you're calling to come hang out. Like they're going to be a lot more helpful in some of those areas, but you're not sharing and disclosing the full parts of your life. You're throwing barbecues with these people. These are the people you like to party with a little bit. But then within that group of 35 is 15. And these 15, they're going to help you move. They're going to be there when things get hard. If you need like $200 because rent's short this month or for whatever,
Right,
something
right.
crazy
Yeah.
happened, they'll give it to you. And then finally, even within that is a group of five. And these are your really, really close friends. They know more about you than anyone else does. These are your hardcore friends that last a lifetime. And then even within that is like 1 to 2 intimate friends, typically a spouse. So even there's like a ring, these circles of friendships is what he
Yeah.
calls them. And it looks different for people like a big extroverted person like me. I might have that 150. For someone like you, Mark, you might have maybe it's more close to 75.
Yeah, I was
And
going
that's
to
the
say
thing
I
about
like those numbers, but I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I don't know 35 people I can invite to a barbecue unless I just throw flyers out at my church, you
for
know?
sure. That's so funny. But like and that's really goes into the subjective nature of loneliness because loneliness, medically defined, is the subjective feeling of being alone, or sorry, it's the loneliness is a subjective feeling of having the gap between your ideal social relationship situation and your actual relationship social situation.
Okay.
Um, so that whether you're an introvert or extrovert, if you feel like there's a discrepancy between what you want relationally and what you have, then you're going to experience loneliness of some sort. So it takes place in it. So loneliness is experienced through a number of different ways because we have a wide variety of kinds of friendships, that we can experience. So if you're missing out on any of those, you could experience loneliness in that way. Um, yeah, then another model that I use is from this guy named Joseph Meyer. He writes about it in his book called The Search to Belong, and it's what he calls is the four spaces of belonging. So the public space is typically anytime you gather in a public space where you don't know anybody, you're surrounded by strangers, but the one thing that you do have in common is that you're there in the same place. The
Wow.
grocery store, you don't know anybody who's there, but you're all gathered there to shop. You can go to church. That's a public space if it's a large enough church. And you might not know everybody in there, but you're gathered for the same purpose of worshiping. Chick-fil-A, don't know anybody there, but you're all gathered there for the same purpose of eating Chick-fil-A, right?
Right.
That's a public space. And often it's within the public space that we then enter into the social space. So that's where we're sharing snapshots of ourselves, kind of the surface level conversations that maybe you have before or after a church service, icebreakers, for a work meeting or something before you dive into business, shooting the breeze with the person who cuts your hair. That's us hanging out in the social space. And within that, you then are like, okay, this person catches my eye. Um, this person has stuff that we have enough in common. Let's go a little deeper. And then you move into the personal space. So in the personal space now, like these are what you typically know as your friends, right? Like
Right.
these are the people you're hanging out over, you're at your house for a bonfire. Your ladies are out for a spin cycle class. Your lady friends. You're having kids over for play dates, with you and your mom friends. That's the personal space. Then finally, the intimate space is where you can be naked and unashamed emotionally,
Right.
maybe physically, with your spouse, obviously, but this is where you have nothing to hide. You can be fully known and loved anyway. And there's only a select few, so like the amount of friends we have in each space decreases, the further you go along. So those are kind of the different ways of how you can look at the depths of friendship. And some studies show that a lot of loneliness and just the what is it? The relational malnourishment that we have in our society is because Americans don't have any intimate and personal friends.
Mm.
We tend to have all the social friends at work or at school or whatever where we're catching up and shooting the breeze, but we don't have those deep friends who know the depths of ourselves, who share in the similar deep things of life, like our faith, and they really know your life story. Um, yeah, that's where we're seeing a lot of, kind of this relational malnourishment that's occurring. So that's all in the depths of friendship.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you have anything else you want to talk about that before
Well, I
I
was going to ask you. You mentioned America. Is America one of the worst cultures for having true friendships?
There's it's so easy just like to be insulated in the Western societies as a whole, but especially the United States, and to kind of apply it to the rest of the world in our research. So, and I haven't studied too much broadly to other countries, but um it's really more of a loneliness pandemic that we are
Okay.
experiencing than an epidemic. Like you're
Yeah.
seeing crazy high levels of loneliness, especially in Western cultures. The more Western and individualized, the more that you're seeing the increase in loneliness rates.
Mm.
It's different for collectivist cultures that are typically very family oriented, who
Yeah.
are a lot more embedded in relational contexts. But yeah, one stat I read, this is from like a couple decades ago, was that America is one of the loneliest nations in the world,
Wow.
which is fascinating. I don't think it is the loneliest, but that sure speaks a lot,
You said the word pandemic, which makes me think about 2020.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that hurt us or made it? For me, it made it better because I experienced the loneliness even more during the
Hmm.
pandemic, and I knew like as soon as we get out of this, I have to start making some friendships.
Hmm.
So, in your experience, from your church or your community or whatever, what have you noticed since the pandemic? Has it gotten better or worse?
I think that is such a good question. It's so multifaceted because there's some studies who and some other different people who've written about like, how since the pandemic we've only holed up, in our homes even more. We've only isolated ourselves even more.
Right.
But actually there's other stats that show that we've been about the same pre and post.
Uh,
It just was particularly poignant during COVID. Maybe we didn't realize how lonely we were until we were forced to stay home, you know, and because because they actually had to go home and ignore like they couldn't ignore their problems at
their
home anymore.
family,
They had to
right?
face it. I heard there were more divorces during 2020 because they couldn't go to work. They literally had to be with their spouse at their home, and so all of those problems that they had blew up. So like uh our American society has been on a decline relationally for decades. And,
Yeah.
even when I started doing this research, like just before COVID, um, 60% of Americans are lonely. And that's a threefold increase, from what it was just 40
Right.
years ago. In the 1980s, we were at 20%. So
Which
I
is
think there are
crazy.
some,
You
yeah, it's
consider
so
we're
crazy.
more populated than we ever have been.
And more connected than ever
Right.
before, right? But that is such an illusion that, because we can work from home over Zoom now,
Right.
that that's not going to take a hit on us relationally. Some of the best parts of working in an office are just the off the cuff conversations you can have by
Right. Exactly.
the drinking fountain or something or over lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention that our brains are literally like we get more exhausted from having a bunch of Zoom meetings because our brain is having to work extra hard trying to like recognize facial
Right,
cues from
right, yeah,
through a screen. And when we have to like when we see ourselves in the corner, like it's our brains are working double time to communicate while also looking at ourselves. Like it's just we're not hardwired for it. So we're only fooling ourselves to think that all of these new, digital communications that we learned how to do in COVID. Certainly, some awesome things came out of that. Everyone uses Zoom now as their communication platform of choice, it seems like. But um, while those are great tools to supplement our relationships, they can't substitute in-person,
correct.
face-to-face relationships. And I think more and more people are realizing, yeah, we're missing that.
Yeah. I don't know if it's changing with Gen Z, but I know, well, the generation before that, what was it, Gen X, where they spend a lot of time on video games talking to people on their headsets, and they're like, "Oh no, those are friends." Like, well, you don't
Mhm.
even know what they look like.
Yeah.
It's a difference in like connecting with somebody, even though you may be learning something about their life while you're, running around through
Mhm.
Call of Duty together. You're not getting the time to like really connect and find out, what are your issues, what are your problems. That's what this podcast is about, iron sharpening iron. That's why it's
Yeah.
called the Valiant Forge. We
Mm.
Where valiant warriors come to be sharpened. How do you be sharpened? You have to be beaten a little bit. Now, beaten's not the right word to use, but for me, a true, and it's somewhere in Proverbs. I'm not going to quote it exactly like it is, but a true friend is someone who, I'm just going to paraphrase, who will call you out on your mistakes and tell you, you need to fix this. That's what a true friend is.
Yeah.
Can you expound on that?
Yeah. There's a number of proverbs that talk about that. A true friend is one who sticks closer than a brother. Um, is one verse from Proverbs there. It's so true. It's so true. And going back to what you're talking about, Gen Z, I write a lot about, specifically with Gen Z and the next generation in my book. A lot of the principles are applied across generations, but Gen Z being our loneliest generation right now. You're right, Mark. It's because, I mean, they're still connecting, right? It's not like they don't have any friends. They're just connecting in different ways than how I connected in high school and how you connected in high school and college. Because when we wanted to hang out, we would go over to each other's homes, or there'd be some other third space in the city that we would go to. Whereas now more and more teens and young adults are going to their homes in their isolated fortresses and they're connecting over Snapchat and FaceTime and video games and they're connecting but it's not the same quality of relationships. There's a reason why, as you're saying, you're preparing for this big bike ride, that's with you and some of your friends. Like, there's just something that hard physical labor with other guys, or other gals, uh, does to you in your relationship. You can't do that in overcoming, Halo 3 on a legendary difficulty or killing all these Nazi zombies. Like, I mean, you're certainly making memories, but I guarantee you, your quality of life is going to be so much better if you can do split screen versus Xbox Live.
Right.
If you
Yep.
can be in the basement of your homes, playing Super Smash Brothers on the same couch, versus just doing it over the headset where you can't see people. Like
Yeah.
we're connected while isolated. So all that to say, like, um, if we can have more of these in-person experiences where we can actually smile at them and not send a smiley
Yep.
emoji, where we can actually give them a hug, then send them a hug emoji, or just texting out our feelings because you can send an emoji that is completely at odds with how you actually feel. It's so
Yeah.
much easier to mask it. You can't hide it near as well when you're in the presence of others, who are truly there to help you. And that's what's going to really push us to the next level. It's
Yeah.
such a unique situation that we're in culturally right now.
I no longer play video games, but I remember this shift when it happened. Was playing back then. I think it was Halo 2. You still
Oh,
had to go to your friend's house and they would
yes.
have like 4 or 5 TVs set up with the
Huh?
connecting link, and then we would have these battles, and then when one of us would win, we would high five each other, the human touch. And then
Uh-huh.
Halo 3 came out, and I think it was the first time that you could online connect, and we went through a campaign together, but we were all in different homes. It
Mhm.
wasn't the same as having a battle in the same house where we're all laughing and joking and high-fiving each other and saying, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that." I remember that shift, and I was like, "This is weird now." It
Wow.
felt so much different.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Oh,
because of my generation that I needed that close connection.
mhm.
But I remember that moment when it changed.
Hmm. Man, those were the good old days, Mark.
Yeah, yeah. I
Oh,
can't even see myself sitting in front of a video game nowadays.
I know. Yeah, I now with kids, I don't have the time for it, but Halo 2, Halo 3, those are the best.
Yeah.
Oh,
So let's do something practical because I'm an
awesome.
introverted person. If you don't mind doing this,
Sure, I love it.
a little bit of role playing.
Awesome.
So make me a friend. Like introduce yourself and try to make friends with me.
Oh, let's do it. Hi, Mark. I'm Jake. How are you today?
Good. I'm good. How are you? My name's Mark. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you, Mark. What's something um what's something you're really excited about these days?
My podcast. Got a lot of people coming up on the interview.
Mm. What's your podcast about?
It's a podcast for Christian men, helping them to grow in their faith.
Oh, that's awesome. What inspired you to start this?
I felt like God told me to do it. I've been a quiet person my whole life, and I don't really like to talk in front of people at all. And God had me read the story of Gideon, where Gideon was like, I'm not a valiant warrior. I'm a loser. I'm the loser in the lowest loser in my family, and my family is a bunch of losers. And God's
Mm.
like, yeah, well, I'm going to help you lead the children of Israel out to defeat the Midianites. So the whole story, and I read that story and it inspired me. Like, there's something different in identity. You are not who you think you are.
Mm.
Me saying I could never be a podcaster, I can never stand in front of a bunch of men and talk to them. That's the guy that I was, and I felt God calling me more. So I one day grabbed a microphone and started talking.
Hmm.
Over time, I talk a little bit more and a little bit more, but so that's how podcast started.
Wow, that's amazing. Um, how long have you been doing the podcast now?
A little over a year.
Okay. How have you noticed God forming you and working in you since you started?
Well, a year ago, if I would have
Uh-huh.
met you, there would have been a lot more awkward silences than there are right now. So that's one way.
That's amazing. What else?
See, I understand what you're doing. You keep asking questions.
Ah.
So that's what I wanted to do because I've recently learned this myself. There are a
Mm.
lot of people in our church, and on a Sunday morning, it's hard. There's so many people and there's a click, not click, but there's a group over here and there's a group over here, and it's hard to just reach out to people. And I've had these moments in the last year where I'd just shake someone's hand and start talking to them, and then there'd be that awkward silence. And then I
Mm.
started realizing recently, you just got to keep asking questions,
Yeah.
keep them talking about themselves, and that's how you build friendships. Am I correct?
Yes, Mark, you're right on it. That's actually where my book finally takes people in chapter 10. It's 10 chapters long. Actually presents kind of like this particular friend small group structure that's very different from a lot of other small group structures that you've ever participated in. But the whole goal of this small group structure, they're called spiritual direction groups, is to give the people in your group time to just talk about whatever they want to talk about. And then the people, after they're done talking about whatever is on their mind, you can only respond by asking questions
Mm,
because questions is what pulls people out. It keeps them curious because it's so easy for us to, instead of getting to know each other, we just kind of talk at each other, whatever we
right.
want to talk about. But to be friends, you have to dig a little bit. Questions are the shovels for the dirt of our social lives, you know? Um, I've never actually phrased it in that metaphor before. Questions are the shovels that really get to the depths of our souls.
Yeah. That's
That's good.
awesome.
I've never
Awesome.
phrased that before. Um, And
Well, it's on
so
a podcast now if you ever forget it.
I know maybe I could go back and find it. So and this is something that I've really been learning a lot. What are our typical go-to questions when we're getting to know somebody?
What do you do for a living?
What do you do for a living? How's it going? Where are you from?
Right.
How'd you find, like how's your day? And all of it, and then that's pretty much it. But then especially when we ask oh, what do you do? There almost subconsciously then ignites a comparison game with that.
Hmm.
Because then you're like, oh, am I doing something that's more significant in work than this person or less than? And you're just like, oh, it's like maybe we don't do that, but that's kind of what the what do you do question triggers in our minds. And for some, they might shrink back or they might actually lean in and try to like
Right.
prove themselves more. But starting with some other more thought-provoking questions like what are you really excited about as of late? What's been some highlights of your life from this last week? That immediately starts to have them share some more intimate details of their
Correct.
life,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and then, and you keep digging a little deeper and digging deeper. And, if you really want to be able to start befriending people a little quicker, like you ask the question, um, how have you been noticing God lately? Um, where has he seemed absent lately? Um, what's something that's been really hard? Um, what's a question you want to be asked
Wow.
right now? Um,
These are
what's
great.
aren't they right? Like,
Yeah.
what's something you don't want to talk about, but you need to talk about,
Hmm.
you know? Oh, I'm getting chills thinking about it. And what I found, especially in my like doctoral research, when we did these spiritual direction groups with a group of, young adults who went through my study, is their sense of friendship and the depth of those friendship formed quicker than they ever could have imagined.
Yeah.
Um, one of my participants, one of my interviewees, said that the depth of friendship he formed in his spiritual direction groups um, it only took 4 weeks, and he grew as close to them in 4 weeks as what took years to develop in a similarly intimate friendship in high school. Took
Wow.
years to get there haphazardly, just kind of living life. You just gradually share your parts of the hard parts of your life here or there while you're walking, just stuff happens. But these groups are intentionally designed to ask questions for you to dig into the meat of your life. How do you see God in the midst of it? How do you not? And you're not trying to fix each other's problems. That's the beauty of questions is you're not trying to feel like you have to give advice to whatever the hardship that the person's sharing about.
You just
You just
have an
simply ask
empathy.
them. Yeah, you're having empathy and you're living life with them. And honestly, sometimes the hardest parts about life is just sitting in the questions and
Yeah.
there aren't answers. And sometimes all you need aren't friends who are giving you all the answers, but friends who just wrestle with the questions with you you
Right.
know? And that's when you feel like, man, I'm not alone with this and they're not trying to fix me. Um, granted there are also situations where we do absolutely want advice from our friends. Like I have
Right.
no clue how to handle this, please tell me. But I think if we want to grow in our friendships, we need to learn how to ask more questions versus just giving our input immediately. So if we can become professionals in asking questions, I think you'll be shocked at
Yeah.
how the quality of your friendships will change.
Yeah. Something I'm going to learn. I'm going to be writing down these questions that you mentioned earlier. So I'm going to, when I go back and listen to the recording, I'm going to go write this one down. Remember
Mhm.
this. Remember this. I actually set reminders in my phone now for things that I tend to forget things quickly. And
Yeah.
now I'm setting reminders in my phone. So okay, I'm trying to stay away from the phone so much because I realize how it can change our interactions. I
Yeah.
mean, we live in a society today where somebody can be looking at their phone while they're having a conversation with you. And I recently did a podcast called Showing Up. Like if your wife's talking to you and you're looking at your phone and being like, "Yeah, honey," that's not showing up. You're not being
Uh-huh.
present. You might be there, but you're not present.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. You might be near them, but you're not with them.
correct.
Yeah,
Can you talk about spiritual friendships? I know there's a study about spiritual
absolutely.
friendships.
Yes. So spiritual friendship's kind of like the big kahuna of my book, that's how do we remedy our loneliness for good? It's through the rediscovery of spiritual friendship. So Spiritual friendship has a long running history in church history, actually. So you find it start coming up, and like Saint Ambrose talks about it, Saint Augustine talks about it, in the third and fourth centuries, but it goes all the way up through through like the 16th century. But the guy that I really focused on a lot with his work on spiritual friendship is named Saint Alred. He was an abbot of a monastery, and Rievaulx was the name of the monastery in Northumbridge, England, I think is what it was, during the 1100s. And he wrote a little treatise called Spiritual Friendship. And it just has some of the most beautiful articulations of what it means to be friends with other believers and friends with God, and just the whole process of finding those deep spiritual friendships. And in essence, a spiritual friendship is one who can mutually pursue Jesus with you. Um, and that's essentially what true friendship is. Like, we don't truly know how to love another as a friend unless you both are experiencing the love of Jesus who laid his life down for you.
Correct.
Like, you don't know what true love is, and therefore what true friendship is, if you don't have that mutual bond over the blood of Jesus Christ. And so that's why he would go on to say that Jesus is our chiefest friend. I mean, he even says, that he laid his life down for his friends. I no longer call you servants, instead I've called you friends, John 15. But then he even takes that and he goes over into First John 4, and he says, when John's writing in that letter that God is love. St. Alred goes so far to say that if God is love and love is the foundation for friendship, then God is friendship.
Right.
God is friendship. So when you let Jesus and the community of the Trinity become our template for what friendship looks like, then that's kind of the basis of of how we should pursue these friendships. So, and they take a number of different forms, but in essence, you don't just do the fun stuff. You don't just go on the bike rides. You don't just play Halo 3. All those are great. Uh, but the more important parts is that you're diving into scripture together. You're praying with one another. You're worshiping together, but you're talking about those deep parts of your life together and inserting God into the picture.
Yeah.
Like, and all of us have spiritual friends. The problem is we just don't use that language for it.
Right.
And we don't know, especially the intimacy parts. And I think when we can attach um, the language of spiritual friendship and kind of that intentionality of, like, if we are who we're with, we were talking earlier about, like, just kind of like the brain science of how you become who you surround yourself with.
Right.
If you want
Right.
to be healthy in any area, you need to be around other healthy people in that area. It's the same thing spiritually, right? If you are who you're with, then you become Christ-like when you're with Christ-like friends. And I'm not just talking on Sunday mornings and then on Tuesday nights for Bible study. Like, find that group of friends who you can also meet organically outside of those set program timeframes, and really go deep into those friendships, because it just exponentially increases our ability to live a holy life, surrender to the Lord. It's so much easier to do when you can do it with other friends, right? Like, I've participated in a couple of Tough Mudder obstacle courses, in my life, and the only way how I can get through those is when I have friends doing them right beside me. You
Yeah.
know, why in the world would I want to run through 30 feet of dangling wires in muddy water, by myself? Like,
Right.
that's torture. Then it becomes a lot more fun when you have friends
Yeah.
who are also being tortured with you. It's the same thing with the crucible of living a holy life in relationship to Jesus. It's so much better with friends.
Yeah. So you used a word that I know a lot of maybe more men in my generation, older men, they don't like the word unless it's with their wife. Intimacy.
Uh-huh.
So
Yes.
can you just describe a little how can a man be intimate with another man and it not be
Yeah,
weird?
for
Is that
sure. Absolutely. So, because we have all these connotations with it, there
right?
are different forms of intimacy, right? We all know about physical intimacy. That's not what we're saying. We're not talking about reliving the glory days from your fraternity, or anything like that. Back in college, um, those intimate, vulnerable conversations is so, so important. Like, I can tell a difference in a man's character solely because like if I look at two different men, I can tell if they're vulnerable with their friends or not, just simply by how they carry themselves.
Wow.
Um, because you have nothing to hide. You live with a higher form of authenticity and a willingness to admit your wrongs. You're a lot more genuine. You're more loving. You're more peaceful. When you live in a kind of a life where you got nothing to hide and you're open about it and you're sharing, but when you're holding it all up inside, you kind of have this posture of puffing your chest out, and it almost can come across as arrogance or pride. I
Right.
can literally I like there is a distinct difference in these personalities of these men solely based off of if they are fully surrendered to Christ or not, and therefore if they are fully surrendered about all these other parts in their life. Um, Truly a different caliber of a man. And I would say the manliest men are the ones who talk about the problems
Correct. Yeah.
because hiding in your problems is actually hiding from love.
Yeah.
It seems like it's safe, for you to, put on the mirage, put on the image that you got your whole life together, but actually the safest place you can live in your life is to fully share the hardest parts about your life and still be loved anyway.
Yeah.
That's how you know you're safe. That's how you got armor to take on life's problems, is when you can fully disclose it. So I think you got to get over it and, but at the same time, it's not just that easy of like, oh, just talk about it, just do it,
Correct.
um,
Yeah. Takes.
because chances are very good that the reason why we are so holed up is because of other things from our childhoods, from our upbringings, like were we, especially if whether we had parents who really made sure that like, hey, you need to be strong, don't cry, snap out of it, you are a man, don't do that, and basically we were shamed into feeling ashamed. Um,
Yeah.
Buck her up, Buttercup,
Yeah.
Um,
That's the generation I grew up in.
yes. And so when that is your image, like from a young boy, as a young boy, you are being conditioned to say, don't show them your problems.
Right.
Don't show anybody your problems, or else you're going to be ridiculed and you're going to be beaten down because of it. Um, and so then at that point, like there's some deep woundings there that have to be overcome, and you also have to then take on the courage to uh, find a group of guys that you can be vulnerable with and overcome that fear of there is the possibility that they might ridicule you,
Yeah.
uh, just like your parents did. But what if they don't?
Right.
You know,
And
uh,
I think that comes with practice.
mhm. It
You
really
just,
does.
I would recommend not doing it in front of a full group, just finding one or two guys that you're close with to start.
Hmm.
And it has to be in a proper setting. It can't just
Yeah,
be, we're just talking about sports and then all of a sudden, you know, I'm having problems with my wife or whatever it is.
so
That's
true.
a simple example, but it's got to be in the right setting. You're having coffee with somebody and you're just talking about life, and then all of a sudden, hey, I've noticed as a person who tries to get people to open up because I'm in the men's ministry and I have to get people to open up once in a while. I just started by, like you're saying, you notice something about them that they're holding something back. And that's
Hmm.
where a little bit of the Holy Spirit comes in and some discernment. You say, hey, I noticed that you look like you're not as happy lately. Is everything okay? That's a question you're talking about earlier, questions. Is
Yeah.
everything okay with you?
Uh-huh.
You don't just bring it up out of nowhere. You sit down and have a conversation, talk about life a little bit, and then just say, "Is everything okay with you?" Is that a good advice?
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. And then that's where having like the circles of friendship or the spaces of belonging are helpful tools because if you can kind of look at like, if you say, for example, you need to be vulnerable, you need to get something off your chest, but you don't even know who to turn to. You just kind of have this blank canvas of just all your friends out there if you were to just write them down. Well, to have a circle of friendship diagram or
Right.
the spaces you can then go in and plot like, okay, like, am I that close to this guy? No. What about this guy? It's like, oh, I- Mark seems like a really good guy. He's constantly showing up. He seems trustworthy. I'm gonna go to him first, you
Hmm.
know? And And so then you can kind of pick the one where you feel like for whatever reason that there's a little bit stronger trust there. Um, and do one, yeah, like you said, two. That's why I recommend these spiritual direction groups I was talking about should only be groups of 3 to 5 people, for the sake of maintaining intimacy in
Yeah.
that space, and so you can share more, you can have more dialogue about those things, and also the physical space matters too.
Yeah.
Like meeting at a home or meeting in a backyard over a bonfire, or meeting out in the country or something like that, in the woods. If you're one of those cool guys, I could never hunt in the woods. I'm a farmer's kid too, and just being out in nature and doing dirty work, I did not inherit the farmer gene, unfortunately. Um, but like those are much more intimate settings
Yeah.
capable of producing intimate conversations versus going to the bar or going to a restaurant or
Right.
even
Where
a
there's a
coffee
bunch of
shop,
people
unless you go
around.
like first thing in the morning at a coffee shop or something when it's dead quiet, like, there's not a lot going on because it's just, it's you have more social conversation in social spaces typically. Not always. You obviously can have um, really intimate conversations in those spaces too, but it certainly can make it a little bit easier and conducive.
Yeah. Before we get ready to land the plane, there is one question that I ask every man that comes on the podcast. I'll
Uh,
ask you in a minute, but do you have any final thoughts?
oh man, I could talk about this for days. Truly, gentlemen, who are listening to this podcast, hear me when say it, but you need friends. Um, you don't know what you're missing out on. If you think you can live this life alone, you're only fooling yourself.
Amen.
You're only fooling yourself. If you think you don't need anyone, that is a pride issue. If you think you don't need anyone, it's because you have something you're hiding, and we are not meant to live in hiding. Um, because God created Adam and Eve to not just be the first human marriage, but also the first human friendship, and they had nothing to hide, and that's when they were in perfect communion, and that's our ideal that we also need to aim for. So if you're debating what that looks like, or if you have any questions, I mean, what I often tell everybody on these podcasts I've been going on is like honestly the first step is just to have courage and reach out to someone and
Correct.
have the conversation. It seems so scary because you hope that they're going to initiate it first, but somebody has to break and be the one to initiate it, be the one, you know, be the man and start the conversation,
Yeah.
right? And do what's hard.
I like
So,
the word courage. I actually
mm,
just did a YouTube short. I'm doing a memorizing a scripture each day and then doing a quick devo on a YouTube short every day.
mm,
Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you, be strong and be courageous? I love the word courage.
yeah.
I have a feeling that you've answered this question over and over again all throughout this podcast, but I have to ask because it's part of my thing. So in 1 Samuel, David was in the cave of Adullam. Saul was chasing him. Saul was not paying attention to what was going on in the kingdom. The men got disgruntled, disheartened. They came to David at the cave of Adullam. These men ended up becoming David's mighty men.
Mm,
David said something to them. It doesn't say exactly in the Bible what David said to them. It's been theorized that Psalm 34, or I think it's Psalm 34, is what David said to them that gave them hope and encouragement to carry on. If you had a situation like this in modern day, you got a group of men coming to you looking for direction, they're disgruntled, disheartened, they don't know what to do next with their life, what would you say to them?
hmm. Oh, that's talk about a good deep question, Mark. That's so good. What would I say to them? Hmm. I would say, um, oh, I really need to sit and chew on it. But what's just coming to my mind is take heart, um, be strong and courageous, as you're saying. Um, does not our strength come from the Lord, you know? And when when we're at our wits' end and we don't know what's going on, we can trust that the Lord is faithful. That even if there's nothing good about what you're going through, uh, there is something good in it. Even though there's nothing good about it, there's something good in it. Something that I routinely tell our church. And we have to trust that the Lord is good. Truly, the difference between doubting God because of a hardship and seeing God in a hardship is a mindset shift.
Amen.
That's all it takes. It's a mindset shift of what you choose to see. You can blame God, you can get angry. And honestly, you read the rest of the Psalms, often they start like that. They
Yeah.
start angry and
Yes. Yes.
upset and frustrated. But then by the end, they say, but the Lord is good.
Yeah.
His mercies endure forever. Um, and that's what matters at the end.
Yeah.
So get it all out, air out your dirty laundry, and trust that the Lord's got you at the end of the day. So.
Amen. So where can people find your book?
Yes, it's on Amazon. So you can head over to Amazon and search up You Need Friends by Jake Thurston. And you can find a paperback copy there, as well as a Kindle edition. Or if you're one of those adults who like to have other adults read to you, through Audible, I'm going to hopefully have the audiobook up by the end of this summer. By August at the latest, hopefully in July. Knock on wood. We'll see how that goes. Or you can head over to www.youneedfriends.com if you want to just look up some more information about just the topics I cover,
Okay.
resources, videos of like different teachings I've done on the topic, as well as links to the book are there as well. Youneedfriends.com.
Yeah, I'll have all that linked up in the show notes. If people want to follow you, do you have is your church on social media?
Yep, yep. So you can follow me directly on Instagram at pastor.jakethurston. Again, that's at pastor.jakethurston on Instagram. Or if you want to follow our church on Instagram as well, we're called Resilient Church, but you can search for at iam.resilientchurch.com.
Awesome.
Or is it iamresilient.church? It's one of those. Search for Resilient Church. It's this orange fire logo. You can't miss it.
I love the name, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Look forward to seeing you again.
You bet, Mark. Thanks for having me. This is
All right.
awesome.